This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian, Miss Berlin. What was that you were doing in there? Was you waving something?
I have a gnat. There's a gnat.
Is that what it was? Are you sure you weren't fanning something?
Waving, that's
Were you
for sure.
crop dusting?
It's a gnat.
Oh,
I
okay.
promise.
And of course, Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh man, everybody's ramping up for Hacker Summer Camp, aren't we?
Oh, I am, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna miss it this year. Mr. Betcher wasn't invited back to Arsenal, so sadly.
No.
You should send a strongly worded letter to the organizers.
Well, I need to get the ground game started.
You need to market better.
You
need
a
should
better
find
ground
somebody
game.
who knows
That's
marketing. Yeah.
Good idea.
They're around. Just throw a rock and you'll find somebody who does marketing. So
I talked to a marketing guy today that wanted my help because he thought I had a lot of Twitter followers and he wanted to know how I did it.
Oh no.
And he wanted like advice for his company. And
are you trying to tell him you're the anti-how-to?
No. I told him that what I do on Twitter probably isn't the best business advice.
Yeah, it's not simpatico. No. All right. Well,
it was very cool though to be asked.
yeah, I get that sometimes too. So we're gonna bring our guest on this week. She is a very well-respected lady in the community, and she's going to talk to us, and we're going to talk about something that is weighing heavily on a lot of minds, having to do with data protections, and it's Miss Wendy Everette Knox.
Knox Everette.
Knox.
Hello.
Again.
It's my Twitter handle throws everybody off because my Twitter handle is old at this point.
so it's your fault. Can we no? Anyway. All right. So welcome to the show. Appreciate you being
Thank
here. You are a slacker.
Thanks for having me.
You're one of our slackers on our break sec. And I was really interested to know that you were a big fan of GDPR, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Maybe you could tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do to help InfoSec and to help everybody.
Sure. So I started my career as a software test intern at Microsoft ages ago on Mac Office. And then post-college, I went to Amazon as an SDET, which is pretty much a person in the QA department who writes code. Bounced around to Google and then Meetup and then back to Amazon, and then ended up using my husband's GI Bill to go to law school, where I pretty much focused on cybersecurity sorts of things. I don't know. Am I allowed to say the cyber word here? I went to law school outside DC where everybody said cyber.
Nobody drinks when we say cyber. We say cyber.
Yeah, I was highly allergic to cyber when I got to DC, and now it slips out.
Yep.
Yeah. So I am actually just wrapping up a fellowship at a law firm called Wilgen, where I've been doing a lot of advising companies on privacy, computer security issues, researching for the attorneys and helping them on lots of things. And GDPR has definitely been one of the big things this past year. We've done a lot of work on it. Very
nice. So these lawyers, are they doing it to help companies, or are they doing it to help themselves, or how are you helping them by doing the research?
Sure. We mostly are helping companies. We do general research to do client alert emails. That's a lot of what the stuff that I've done has got into. We send emails out to clients who are in particular sectors. ZG works a lot with smaller startups, so companies that make apps to do various things. They do also have a lot of bigger software companies as clients. And so when things like the UK come out with their consent guidance, we will go in and look through like huge, massive PDFs of guidance and sort of try to distill it down to this is the sort of thing that you will probably care about.
Yeah. Okay. So GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, is taking over what used to be called Privacy Shield, right?
They're actually somewhat separate.
Really?
So,
Oh, okay.
well, yeah, this is all complicated. The EU used to have the Data Protection Directive 95/46. GDPR is replacing it. So we were talking about this a little bit before the show.
Mm-hmm.
Directives are things that the European Union comes up with basically a set of pretty detailed guidelines that the individual countries implement in their laws. And the Data Protection Directive basically talked about various ways that you would protect the privacy of consumers and customers and people there. And one of the things is if you wanted to transfer data outside of the EU to another country, that country had to have what's called an adequacy finding.
Mm-hmm.
And the Safe Harbor Privacy Shield are basically ways that was done for the US. They've basically done other countries have adequacy findings. So like Canada, so EU, you could transfer data to a company in Canada. There are other ways to do it too. You can do various contract clauses between the European country and the foreign country that will talk about how you're going to protect user data. So I guess it kind of fits in, but it's not quite exactly the same thing. This is my like lawyer nitpicking. Sorry.
No, that's cool. So the privacy shield was just the EU to US. So EU to China would be a different agreement. EU to Australia would be in a different agreement. EU to Zimbabwe would be yet another agreement. Was there any kind of similar grouping? Was there like the EU had? Is GDPR kind of what's trying to replace all of them, or are there still separate ones?
There will still be sort of separate agreement / findings. The Privacy Shield will probably stay, and it will now be the GDPR will be, bringing new rules to protect customer data. But the Privacy Shield will still sort of be the way that data gets transferred to the US if it's going to be transferred.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Betcher, you said you had a scenario of some kind talking about what's the downside of people having their data protected, and we talked about this before the show. So,
Well, I mentioned it, right?
yeah.
So
He gave us a teaser.
Yeah,
He didn't
teaser,
actually,
yeah. So, I wanted to discuss the downsides to the individual of this law, if any. So I know it can increase cost, probably increase the cost of innovation or hinders it in some way, because companies would have to funnel money that they would otherwise spend on innovation or whatnot, profit, I don't know, and possibly features of different software that they may develop or use. But also, my child got a Fitbit yesterday, and so I had to help him set up this Fitbit. Turns out that they were too young for a Fitbit.
Yep.
You couldn't do anything, and it wouldn't let us even set up the application. It said, hey, you got to wait for 2 more years.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
So we had to re-image the phone, set up a new Gmail account, lie and say that they were a 18-year-old girl, and then all of a sudden we could use the Fitbit. Right.
Curious,
so I'm thinking maybe.
Were they turning on 18 there or on 13? Because 13 is usually the age at which COPPA.
They were younger than 13, so I just said, well, I'll just be 18. Right.
Okay, just be safe. Yeah, 18.
Of course. Now, yeah, you were right. It was 13. I Googled it. But it's like, yeah, they're going to start getting ads for, birth control or whatever, because they're selling this data to different companies or whatnot. And yes, I can see that, okay, we got to protect children or whatever. Their data can't be in this thing, even though their data is already in Google or whatever. But yeah, maybe that is a downside, that they just can't use the app then at that point. right?
Yeah.
And it's just a Fitbit, right? What's the harm in that?
Oh, you did not just say that. What's the harm in that?
There have been like murder cases where they've used evidence from Fitbits and stuff.
I
It's actually
read
kinda
that. That was
interesting.
awesome, wasn't it?
Wild.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'll let Wendy answer that question.
So yeah, we would shelf it for 2 years or lie about their age,
Yeah.
which is a downside, I think.
It definitely is. I mean, there is definitely a concern that companies will shy away from implementing some cool new feature because they're unsure how it will fit in. This is you like set me up perfectly for my talk at B-Sides is going to be about whether we should favor software product liability or regulations because one is essentially a ex ante scheme regulations, as in you know what the rules are going into something before you build a piece of software, and software product liability would be a ex post scheme, wherein you can just build it, but then if there's a problem later on, it might go to trial and there could be a jury involved and there'd be a lot of uncertainty there. And there's different reasons why you would want one or the other. I'm not going to give the whole talk here.
Very nice.
You guys should come to B-Sides Las Vegas and hear my short talk. The talk is a lot of, I don't know which is better. Here's things to think about under each. But definitely a lot of companies are concerned about the uncertainty that something like GDPR does bring. The GDPR is a lot of new regulations, and they are fairly detailed, but they're still somewhat general. So let me pull this up here. I was reading aloud earlier Article 32, which is one of the security things, and it says there must be encryption of personal data. You have to ensure the ongoing confidentiality, integrity, availability, and resilience of processing systems and services. And it's like, okay, that's a fairly detailed regulation because it's telling me a couple different things that I must do, but what does it actually mean to ensure the availability? Like we all know stuff goes down, like, you know, are we talking about like a 5.9 SLA here? Is this a reasonable best effort? How is that actually going to be interpreted by a court if something goes in? And that uncertainty is can be sort of a business problem for companies. You know, like if you're a business, you want to think about managing your risk, and this is a big unknown for a lot of companies, and they could well shy away from doing things. I mean, what's happened a lot in the past too is companies say, well, okay, if I want to do this, and we think it violates the regulation, what's the fine? And then they think, what are the chances I get caught? And they could say, well, could I maybe just assume I might have to pay the fine? The problem with the GDPR is it has much, much higher fines, and it becomes a much more serious sort of thing to think about.
Yeah. So you put in the document there up to 4% of annual global turnover or $20 million, whichever is greater. So the minimum is $20 million for a fine, and it could be up to billions.
No, it says up to that cost.
Yeah,
up to 4%.
Up to 4% or 20 million, whichever is greater. So
so it caps at 20 million.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. Well, 20 million's
that's a lot of money.
It's not chicken
Not
feed.
for some people.
Yeah. I got that in my pocket here. I just throw that out.
There may be companies for which like that's fine.
Thank you, Patreon, right? Break.
Exactly. Yeah. So all right, so we were talking about, Mr. Betcher was talking about the Fitbit with his daughter and the data that he's worried about them saving. Will this cause organizations to think more about data classification? Because one of the things that Wendy said was in that article that she had mentioned that encryption is required, but it doesn't tell you what level of encryption. So it's fairly broad in some of these requirements. So if you can say, well, this data is only important for blah, so we only put triple des on it, or we only rot 13'd it because it's really just somebody's name. Is level classification or is incident information classification going to become more important under GDPR?
I think it probably would, because the GDPR does definitely make distinctions between sensitive data. There's the concept of data that is publicly available. It does understand that companies have data about individuals that it did not necessarily directly get from the individual. And that is definitely something that companies would have to think about. If you read a lot of the guides for businesses about what's the first thing you should do as you're getting ready for GDPR, they recommend you do an assessment of all the data that you have. And those can be really hard for businesses. You know, do you know all the information that your marketing team has? Do you know all the information that your IT team has? You know, like what are they logging from firewalls? Like that can be personal information under the GDPR.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I'm looking at one part, accuracy. Personal data shall be accurate where necessary, kept up to date. Wow, that is, you said earlier it's detailed, but it's kind of detailed to the point of vagary, right? Because kept where necessary, kept up to date. What does that mean? It should be accurate. What does that mean? I mean, what if the client or the individual wasn't accurate in theirs and define accuracy? I mean, this kind of, to me, ensures that well-paid lawyers remain well-paid, right? It's just, man, it's just a
don't poke the tiger.
With
Don't poke the tiger. Jeez.
Yeah, well, there is a right basically to have your data corrected, as well as the right to have your data exported and have your data deleted. And if you go to a company and say, hey, you have this inaccurate data, I would like it corrected, and you as a company have shared it with, say, there's another company that helps you keep your records, you have to then tell that other company about it, and you have to do it within a fairly short period of time.
Yeah. And sometimes there's a lot of those companies, you know, even for a small business, you may have, you know, outsourced upon outsourced that you may not even know where any of the data is in the end, you know.
That's why they tell you to start with an audit.
Yeah.
So third-party business agreements will be more important to keep track of who has the data, who is sharing the data.
Compliance teams are just going to get bigger because they got to answer all the questionnaires from their third parties and wow.
Yep. So all of these don't have a specific timeline. So, you know, it says personal data will be kept accurate and necessary up to date. Is that based on what the auditor determines is a due diligence kind of thing? Every year you're supposed to go and make sure that people are updating this, or will there be mechanisms on web applications go, okay, you know, you haven't updated this in, 12 months. Maybe you should look and make sure the phone numbers are correct. What are we talking about? Or is it something entirely different?
I'm actually not sure about that one. I mean, countries can definitely sort of build on this, and it could be that a country could choose to put some requirements onto that. There are, my find is on the GDPR text is not working at the moment. So I'm going to speak from memory, and hopefully I'm not too inaccurate. I think that there are some things like the request for data deletion that you have like 40 days to comply with, I think.
Wow.
And it's 40 days or like some reason why you can't do it that quickly. And you have to pass it along to your subcontractors and so forth. Like they're fairly short time periods for most businesses. But yeah, it's unknown how that will actually be enforced. The way that the idea, as I understand it, is that individuals can bring a case to a court and say like, hey, you know, for whatever reason, I asked for this, it didn't happen, and it will go up in the same way that the Shreem's case brought up right to be forgotten.
That's
going to be hard, because if you know anything about databases, a lot of times you cannot delete data. Otherwise, it'll screw all the links up and everything. You just have to mark it as you know, don't use it or
on
expired,
your backup tapes.
And it's still there.
Your backup tapes and everything. I mean, there is,
and that could get expensive.
There's basically a, you know, to the extent reasonably possible. But like where would a court draw that line? Like, does the court understand how relational databases work?
Yeah, really.
Well, in another case, I mean, how many people are actually going to take a company to court and spend the money to have their data forgotten? I mean, for 99.59 worth of people on the earth, they're not going to take the time and effort to do so. They're just going to assume in good faith that the company has done what they were supposed to do. I mean, only if I would say that these kinds of things, or data erasure or whatever, is going to be for extreme cases. Am I wrong in this assessment or thoughts?
I mean, it matches what I would assume, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, some of this stuff, it seems like probably wasn't needed to be put in here and made it needlessly complicated. I don't know if this was drafted by politicians or whatever, but it just doesn't seem like there was a really good handle on some of the stuff that was involved with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can also say that the European countries have a very different view of privacy than the US does. It definitely is a different viewpoint there than there is here. Like here, I know, shocking. We have some sectoral regulation of a few verticals, and they have had a very different viewpoint of it. They also, I mean, they vary in other things too. They have like moral rights and copyright. And so you could say there's a lot of sort of the philosophy of the person that you can see a little bit more in European law than you see in the way that we do things here. I mean, and they don't have the First Amendment. So a lot of the problems with the right to be forgotten in the United States is the First Amendment. And that's not at play in the EU in the same way.
Yeah. So
I see words like adequate, reasonable,
lawyer wiggle
appropriate,
words, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Who
just
decides
like so
that?
vague, right?
Yep.
It's left up to the auditor. Does the auditor believe it was adequate? Does the auditor believe that it was reasonable?
But what if the if the auditor believes it's reasonable, but it wasn't, and it makes it to court?
I think that's where companies will have to take the auditing company to court and go, hey, look, we showed good faith, 35 days. Here's the process we followed. It took us 75 days to get, Sir Richard Branson removed from all of our databases, because he's got so much data, I think that it may cause more litigation for companies as well as possible auditors. So the auditors are really going to have to be stepping up their game as well.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the problem with trying to create regulations to govern technology is that they want them sort of loose and vague enough to not be tied to technology, like the very specific piece of technology, because you don't want to have to go through this multi-year process, when like a new version of Windows comes out. But then in doing so, you have to use words like reasonable that are basically so wishy-washy that there's not necessarily always agreement of what that actually means.
Yep. Yeah, before the show we were talking about reasonable and all those, and I brought up the fact that HIPAA does a lot of that as well. You've got reasonable encryption standards or adequate or whatever, and they have what's called addressable requirements, which are not, you must install a Palo Alto firewall with something other web proxy. It's like you must have something that filters web content. You must have something that, separates your network segments or whatever. They don't care how you do it. It just needs to happen. I've noticed a lot of parallels with HIPAA, at least in the U.S., which is the health. Something portability and something act. It's killing me. Something. It's like I'm humming a song or something here. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. The I got me. Yeah, It killed me. So, they have attestation. They have, if you want to take your information out of a hospital, you have the ability to find out who all has looked at your data. They don't have a right to be forgotten kind of deal, but I see a lot of the same kind of language that I'm seeing in GDPR. So it doesn't seem to have fixed the breach issue in the healthcare industry. So I'm wondering about the breach issues overseas, because one of the things that I noticed and read on Wikipedia's side about GDPR was you must notify people within 72 hours of a data breach. Now, it doesn't say within 72 hours of us noticing there was a data breach, 72 hours within a data breach. Well,
72 hours with a data breach or some reason why it was not within 72 hours. And I mean, I would hope that we didn't know that it happened would be a valid reason. Although then you could say like, well, did you have adequate monitoring and so forth?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we've seen in numerous breach reports over the years, the average breach noticing is like 200 and something days. So that ship has sailed. The 72 hours.
Even once
sailed.
Yeah, once you know that there's a breach, you still need to figure out what happened, what data was taken out, what did they really get access to before you can notify people. Yeah. It's a very aggressive timeline.
Yeah. And as we've seen with a lot of companies who have data breaches, it takes them 72 hours just to tell people that there's actually been a breach, let alone what exactly has happened. I mean, it's been a couple of weeks and we find out, the first words out of their mouth is no customer data has been accessed and whatever. And then a week and a half later, we have, there might've been a small number of people. So, I mean, this is going to require a lot more responsibility in reporting these things. You can't just, wait 72 hours and say, yes, we've been breached. And then, the fines, when do the fines happen? Is it when they get breached, or is it after, they've decided that, they've, the extent of the breach? Is it just the fact they've been breached period causes the fine, or is it what has been breached? If it's customer data, if it isn't customer data, do they still pay a fine?
That one I'm actually not sure about. I think, a person could bring, a complaint saying that the 72-hour notification rule was violated.
Yeah.
And it could go, I'm not positive on at what point they would go trigger it. I mean, it would seem that it should be like the HIPAA security rule sort of thing, where just the fact that you were breached does not trigger a fine. It has to be, you were in violation of something and they found out about it through the breach. The 72-hour thing is starting to be, I don't want to say it's a little more common. It's also in the New York Department of Financial Services new cybersecurity regulations.
Okay. They do 72 hours too?
72 hours to tell the superintendent, I believe.
Okay. All right. Because I was thinking that 72 hours is kind of short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping it would start to be a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. I believe the NYDFS ones are supposed, within 72 hours of you realizing something might have happened, you should tell them hey, we are going to go investigate. And then it keys off of that. So it's not telling individuals, we know that your birth date and last four of your credit card were accessed. It's, hey, we think something could have occurred.
Okay. So one of the articles that we saw was, I don't know if it's FUD or not, but there were people that are worried that because of the massive amount of fines that companies may try to cover up the fact that they've been breached. Because you said the maximum is 20 million, which for Microsoft, that's not a big deal. They probably paid bigger fines over the Internet Explorer lawsuit. But for some companies that could be something that just destroys them. So is it, obviously 20 million is the max, but it's kind of a game changer.
I think if you get caught trying to cover it up, you'll definitely be charged the max.
Yeah, these are up to. At the same time, up to 4% of your worldwide growth. That's something serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely something that they probably did consider, where you want the fine serious enough such that people would actually pay attention to the regulation, because otherwise people are going to be like, oh, well, it's a $2,000 fine. And if we go do this thing that we think might possibly violate the regulation and we get $5 million in profit from it, that's probably an acceptable trade-off to us.
Sure.
So you need it high enough there, but yeah, then it creates this other incentive where people would be incentivized to cover up the things, I don't know how it's going to play out. It's definitely something that, there's a sensitivity there on, companies. It's a huge deal for them. It would probably get them into much more trouble if they did try to cover up than if they were like, hey, we had this breach, here's how we were attempting to do adequate security, and this particular issue happened, and to come clean and cooperate. That would definitely be the best advice to a company who found themselves in a situation, but I do understand where the fear is coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's kind of like that, lower down in the businesses too, right? So just like with, if you put a lot of security controls around something, they're going to try and get around it.
Yep.
right? It's the same concept. If you put a whole bunch of fines on it, they're going to try and get around it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for companies that are now in the cloud, and we've got a link in the show notes to this as well, cloud compliance or cloud computing and AWS and your Googles and your Azures of the world, for some companies, where the data is being stored in those clouds becomes very, very important, right? Because I mean, with AWS, I know, because from personal experience, you can tell Amazon, I only want my data in a specific availability zone. But if you're using something like, and please email us, bds.podcast@gmail.com if I get this wrong. But from what I understood from like Google, the data is basically put everywhere in the world, which can cause some issues if you're using Google to store customer data, because that information can be put pretty much anywhere in the world. I don't know if they have the ability like Amazon to say, well, we only want the data stuck in Germany or Singapore or what have you. But knowing where the data is being put in the cloud is going to be very important for your compliance people, right?
Yeah, so the GDPR brings in the idea of data controllers and data processors. This should be totally familiar to anybody who's had to take the CISSP or who works on this sort of stuff. And so basically, the Amazon in that instance would be a data processor, as are all the like plugins and so forth that you might be using on AWS are basically data processors, and the processors have requirements under GDPR that are pretty new. Like if they discover that there's a data breach, they need to notify the controller, who then would go notify. And so it does basically impose a lot more requirements on companies that have not particularly had to do this.
Yeah.
If they're in sort of the healthcare world, this is sort of analogous to how you have to have a business associate agreement. And so we're moving, the GDPR moves you sort of into that sort of paradigm where you need to have these agreements with everybody who gets the data. So you don't, when you get data from a consumer, you basically have to tell them, these are things we're going to do with your data, and then you hand it on to a processor. You need to have an agreement with them that talks about like how to adequately protect it, what the data can be used for, under what sort of consent regime or whatever, like this data is being processed, because you can't process the data without like a particular, like one of the allowed reasons under the GDPR.
Yeah. So you said the user consent thing, is that going to be like the EULA that nobody reads?
Well, they're trying not to. UK in particular has said that if you are going to use, data for marketing or so forth, you can't give the user a big wall of text with a single checkbox that says, yes, I agree to all of this, which is the way that it often happens now. They would like a separate checkbox for marketing consent, and they want things to be very clear to consumers. And so there's definitely more of a push under the GDPR to get sort of bounded consent, so that the consent, if the user signs up for marketing emails about summer vacations, then you can't email the user about like, ski boot sale and winter vacations possibly, because it was a time-bound specific consent.
Yeah. Interesting. So, it's like targeted ads, but it's targeted ads by regulation. So
maybe.
Wow.
I mean, it will be interesting to see how this plays out, because right now, there's a lot of concern about like, if you have a customer database and you're sending marketing messages to these customers, do you need to go back and get further consent from them to continue to market to them? And you have to keep records of all of this and so forth. It can be a bit of a burden for smaller companies.
Yeah. So how is this affecting other compliance frameworks? Because we're talking about GDPR with data in the cloud. So we're talking about Cloud Security Alliance requirements. If you're doing business, you're going to have to deal with things like PCI. Medical is going to have to deal with HIPAA. Is GDPR affecting, at least in the U.S.? I'm sure there's other frameworks elsewhere that overseas. How is that? Is GDPR affecting our frameworks over here in the States?
I have not seen that. It might have to do with the small world that I work in, I'd be very interested to hear on Twitter and whatever people are seeing this.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the most familiarity with some of the various NIST frameworks, like 171 with the confidential information and 53 and the CIS controls and whatever. And you can say that those can be an example of what is reasonable security and reasonable attempts to maintain confidentiality. And so they could be essentially a standard of care that helps you decide if something is reasonable or not. And so they would sort of fit into the GDPR in that way, or fit into like the New York DFS regulations or something.
Nice.
It would be interesting to see as, you know, new standards come out, like whether they do start picking up some of the ideas from the GDPR and reflecting them.
It'd be nice if there were a framework that could encompass a lot of these different standards, including this one, like an ISO or something, that a company could say, well, we're compliant with this, so therefore we're
meta compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are those spreadsheets out there that map various compliance frameworks to each other. I have far too many of them sitting, those Excel spreadsheets on my on my laptop.
Sometimes I curl up with a hot cocoa in my hand and I make those.
Yep.
Can you publish those?
Sadly, no.
To help everybody?
If you go to the audit scripts that, oh gosh, do I still have this bookmarked? There's a website that has a bunch of these that has sort of a mapping between them, which has been very helpful.
Cool.
We'll put them in the show notes. Is there already GDPR insurance? You know, if you don't want to adhere to these and then you all of a sudden get nailed.
That's what lawyers are for. They're your insurance.
I'm not aware of them, but I don't do insurance law, so I don't know. Yeah, which should also be I totally spaced on this earlier. None of this is legal advice coming from me.
Oh, really? I was going to put that disclaimer in the show notes.
It is coming from me, though.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
So it says in there, so minimum technical measures under the GDPR, real-time protection, antivirus, anti-malware, and anti-spyware software. It says you have to have it, but does it have to be installed? Does it have to be running? Does it have to be updated? Do you have to do weekly scans? You know, there's a lot of things that I get pushback sometimes from different departments saying, well, it doesn't really say that it has to be running, right? It's installed, so we're compliant, right?
That's the whole compliance versus security.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't that kind of drive the industry? I mean, seeing that stuff inside the GDPR, all these anti-malware, companies are like, woo, now we're safe for the next 20 years because it's required to have a product like that. This kind of talks like the PCI stuff. It's like Section 8 is all about passwords, but then, the password requirements there are arguably old and outdated,
Yeah.
It's like saying antivirus. We need antivirus. So, Symantec and McAfee are like, whew, thank God. Now we're good for another 20 years. That kind of thing.
Yeah. What happened with the OWASP top 10 was it you must have like a web application firewall in there now? And it's like, who's the one pushing for that?
Yeah. Who's pushing the industry? I mean, when this was drafted, do you have any idea of who was involved with that? Were corporations involved with this to make sure that there was some kind of sanity check in there where, governments can say they do this, but then companies to be like, oh, hey, that doesn't make any sense. You probably need to work on that. Here's a bucket of money. Please make that changed. Or
there were no lobbyists involved in the creation of this document.
Oh, totally. I am not that familiar with how European legislation gets through. I do know they use I cannot pronounce the word correctly, rapporteurs, and various countries have inputs and so forth. It's a whole complicated process, and there are definitely folks who are seen as more business friendly who go and try to shift the text a little bit. There are definitely folks out there who can talk to you for hours about the process of this. I imagine at the end of the day, it's not really that dissimilar from what happens with the way legislation in theory gets done in the U.S.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. So one of the other things we were talking about before the show was the fact that this is going to go in May of next year, 2018. And at the same time, for those of you who are in the UK, we're not going to get political. Brexit is happening now. Whether or not it actually happens or not is, there may be ways around it or loopholes that gets them out of it. But there is a dead drop where the UK will no longer be part of the EU. And how does GDPR affect England and the UK, whether or not they stay in the EU or not? I understand from a business point of view, the British and the UK businesses would still have to follow GDPR to do, work with the other EU members. But what about the data that is being held for UK residents that's already out there? Are they going to be protected under GDPR? Are they going to be protected under something that they have to create themselves?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I am very unsure what the actual answer would be, because that gets into a lot of complicated international law. As you mentioned, UK companies who have data for people who are still EU citizens would still be subject to the GDPR, because the GDPR has the extraterritoriality requirement where any company that has data essentially from EU citizens is subject to it. As far as like what would still protect UK citizens, they have the UK implementation of the earlier data privacy directive, which I am not a UK law person. I imagine that would still stay on the books. And so that would provide, at least a fallback sort of protection. I assume this would be the kind of thing that would be getting negotiated as part of Brexit. Like, do we keep some of these regulations? Do we re-implement them into UK law? Like, how would that actually work?
Yeah. Okay. I was trying to see how old this UK data protection was, because the UK has been a part of the European Union for quite a while. So I was wondering if this would actually continue to protect them, or if they'd have to amend it to, protect them against, new things. I mean, we still have the Data Privacy Act of 1976, which predates the internet in many cases. So, I don't know.
The data protection directive is from 1995.
Okay.
And so it's kind of old, which is part of was one of the reasons given for why the GDPR needed to be done. They wanted to standardize things because the directive is implemented in various countries slightly differently, and the regulation in theory should be much more similar across all countries, but also it's newer and it can, in theory, more effectively address advances in technology.
Yeah. So let's say your boss comes to you tomorrow and says, I think we need to implement this GDPR thing because we're going to be opening an office. What would be some of the first things that we should talk about at our company if we were going to implement this? And we were up until now a completely U.S. company. Everything was here in the U.S. And all of a sudden your boss goes, we're going to open an office in Paris. What?
Sure.
Or we're going to start taking, orders from EU people. What are some things that we should talk about and discuss first before we do that?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is one that we already mentioned, which is that you should probably start by auditing the data that you have. What do various teams have in terms of personal data? Are any of those sensitive types? How are they being stored? And so basically, doing a pretty standard data mapping walkthrough so you understand all the information that you're holding. You really also would want to then say, okay, under the GDPR, what's the lawful basis for processing all of these? Are we doing it under consent? Are we doing it under one of the other things, like is there a legitimate interest or something else for it? If it is under consent, which is probably one of the most common ones, do we have adequate consent from users? There's the question of, do you need to go back and get consent for for data that you already have? Most of what I've read has seemed to say no, but that's somewhat unclear. Definitely develop an incident response plan that can handle, what's going to happen if there is a data breach. as you're designing new products or working on what you have now, start thinking about sort of the data protection by design, the need to start doing de-anonymization and encryption and so forth. And you also need to figure out who's going to be your data protection officer. The GDPR requires that there be one person for each company. It can be an employee or a third party who you hire, who is the person who takes responsibility for all the compliance. And finally, it wouldn't necessarily apply in this scenario, but it does apply for some companies. They need to, if they're in various different European countries, they need to basically figure out which country they will consider their home country, and they will be under essentially, under the specific rules for that country if they conflict across the various countries they're in.
So if the office was in Paris and we're taking orders, or we've got German employees, we'd have to comply with both the French version and the German version?
No, actually, this makes it, under the directive, I believe you might have had to. What GDPR is trying to do is, if you, say, have an office in Sweden and an office in Germany and an office in Ireland, you pick one of those countries, and it's supposed to be the country where you do the most significant processing, to be your home country. And you basically, if you need permission for processing, you would get it from the data protection people in that country and so forth.
Would it make sense for you to go, okay, we're going to, start doing business in England or Europe, all the data should stay in Europe instead of, hey, we're going to bring it back across the pond over here to the US? Would it make more sense to just leave it in the UK or EU?
It could. I mean, if you're going to transfer it, you need to be transferring either, under one of the findings of adequacy. So like, Canada has a finding of adequacy to transfer data, although there's currently a question about whether they'll keep it under the GDPR, or the company that, when you do the transfer, you basically can set up contract clauses that will set up, the protections for it. This is not an area I've done a huge amount of research and work in, so I understand, you need either the adequacy finding or the contract clauses to protect it. And there's pretty standard EU ones that you can use under the data protection directive. So here are sort of boilerplate contract clauses that you can use. And I believe it should be pretty similar. That would definitely be something that, if you're going to do that, obviously your firm's attorneys would be, making sure that you're doing that under adequate protections.
Okay. So get a good lawyer, make sure that he understands GDPR, or get Miss Wendy, hire Miss Wendy. She'll teach you. No?
They should definitely go to Zoljan.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Miss Amanda, Mr. Betcher, do you have any other questions or thoughts or anything?
Nope.
Well, there's a few things I see under here that they may have worded without really good advice. For example, let me just go back to the antivirus. It says real-time protection. It doesn't say anything about weekly scans or regular scans, right? So if a piece of malware that doesn't have a signature yet in the antivirus world, and we all know that they get those signatures from the same place, it's the same database, somewhere in Israel, I believe, and at the time it's loaded onto the machine, it's not considered a virus, but yet maybe a day later it is, but you're not running those daily scans or weekly scans, you're never going to pick it up.
Politicians just fell asleep when you tried to explain that, dude. They don't
Exactly.
care about that stuff. It's all trickling down, man. They're worried about the overview stuff, which for them is not, antivirus and stuff. I mean, they're just reading all the buzzwords and putting that in.
And
so,
it's in almost every one of these clauses that you can nitpick it and just rip it apart to where it's meaningless.
Yeah.
Right. From a security standpoint.
Well, I mean, and
I guess it's, best effort or whatever.
Auditors are going to play black and white on that. So, I mean, you can either, Miss Wendy laughs, but auditors will sometimes play hardball with that stuff, So, I mean, it depends on if you've got a good auditor who will be willing to work with you, or an auditor who's like the word of law, man,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
the word of law and how they interpret it.
Their word of law. Yes.
Yeah. Their word of law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I mean, if this goes into
punk.
a court and gets argued, then you're going to have to try to explain to a jury or a judge or to a regulator, hey, I was following this standard. This was a industry practice that I was doing.
Yeah. Reasonably, I did what was reasonable, or and unfortunately, if you're in court, what reasonable may, for 12 angry men or women is it's not going to be what you consider reasonable. So, all right. Well, Miss Berlin, do you have anything else? No,
I do not.
Well, Miss Wendy, I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm glad you were able to get on there. So you mentioned earlier in the show that you were going to be at B-Sides Las Vegas for Hacker Summer Camp. Is there anything else you're going to be doing there?
I am. So I'm helping Cat Sweet run the Lockpick Village.
Nice.
Tuesday at 6:30, I'm giving my talk on basically regulations versus software product liability. So we're going to get into some economics of these various things. Should be interesting. It's a 25-minute talk. So I'd maybe stop by or check it out on YouTube later. Okay. And then later in the week, I'm going to be talking about basically border security and crossing borders, sort of the legal and security craziness at Sky Talks. So you either come or you miss it.
Is that talking about like the Constitution free zone, like 100 miles and all that stuff?
Yeah, some of that. And like the people keep saying like, oh, should I wipe my phone before I go across? Should I set up fake social media accounts? Do not do that. That's a horrible idea.
I don't. Anytime they ask me, I'm like, I don't have a Facebook or anything. And it's like, well, how can they prove that? Are they going to hold me here and then go search for me?
Yeah.
So
but it is a felony. It's not a good idea.
It's
so
probably
you said don't take
felony.
a burner phone and all that?
Well, you see, now we're getting into the Sky Talk stuff. You should come to the Sky Talks.
God, I really want to come. Maybe next year I will definitely do DEF CON and B-Sides.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. If you're a U.S. citizen, you have a right of entry. Your devices do not. If you have a phone that has nothing on it, they might decide it's suspicious. They might take it away from you. You might enter the country without your phone. Are you okay with that? Like it's all, it's like this GDPR stuff, right? Like where's your risk? Like what do you want to put up with?
Yeah, it really depends on the agent who's looking at you, if he's had a bad day or not. So, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So, everybody check out Miss Wendy's talk there at DEF CON and especially the Sky Talk, because those, if I go to DEF CON, those are probably going to be the ones that I want to go see, the ones that are not going to be recorded, because I heard there's some really, really great stuff in there with regards to that. So.
And then they let me in, so I don't know how that happened.
Oh, come on, man. Oh, come on. So, Miss Berlin's also going to be at the DEF CON Black Hats B-Sides as well.
I will be at DEF CON for sure. I do not have a B-Sides ticket, but I usually manage to wrangle my way in.
Social engineering master.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I got on some list last year that got me a ticket. I don't know.
Oh, very nice. Are you going to be speaking at B-Sides or anything? I'm
not speaking at anything. We a group of us put in a panel for DEF CON that got shot down. Oh. We're going to do an author panel, but yeah.
Well, maybe we can do the panel here.
I'm a goon this year though for the second year, so nice. I'll be working the whole time.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you guys see Miss Berlin, give her a high five and, she'll yell at you.
Tackle me in the hallways.
She'll yell at you to get back in line and shut up.
Make a hole.
Yeah, make a hole. All right. So, Mr. Betcher, you're going to not be at Hacker Summer Camp like me. Miss Wendy, are you going to be at DerbyCon?
I am unfortunately probably not. I am starting a new job in late August.
Where are you going to be moving to? As if he didn't already know.
It's not quite public yet, but it's going to be very close to you. I know.
You mean you might be able to come to CSEC East?
That's the plan.
Man, I'm telling you, we got a lot of people moving up to Seattle. Mr. Domko, who we've had on the show before, he's going to be moving up here. He's taking a job. which is very cool. I hope I can say that. I might want to find out.
Uh-oh.
Okay. We're
Find out before you publish that.
perfect top of the hour. I can edit that out. So, but yeah, there's a lot of people who are moving up here. So that's awesome. So
You'll forget.
Swell our infosec ranks. Mr. Betcher can move up here too. It'd be nice.
I'll move over there. I just need some things taken care of.
You mean like money?
No,
it's a little expensive. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we've got one other piece. Miss Wendy, if you want to stick around for this, you can. But it's talking about our DerbyCon CTF. So if you want to hang out, that's cool. If not,
I'm on East Coast time, so I'm gonna duck out. But I will look forward to hearing about DerbyCon CTF.
Awesome.
On the
all
podcast.
Right. All right. Thank you, Miss Wendy. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Oh, wait. Before you go.
Oh.
How do we get a hold of you if we wanted to talk to you about GDPR stuff? Points of contact.
Sure. I am on Twitter. My handle is @WendyCK.
Okay.
And linked from that, I have my domain, wendyk.org. You can basically email anything at that domain, and it will arrive in my Gmail inbox.
Awesome. Okay.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Later.
Bye.
Okay. Now she's gone. We can be evil again. I felt weird about, having a lawyer on, so felt like I need to have my Miranda rights read or something. Anyway. Yeah, she's I was really stoked to find out she may be moving up to this general area of which I'm in right now. Anyway, so all right, so this is the moment that all of you have been fast forwarding through to find out about. Sadly, you should listen to the talk with Miss Wendy. It was excellent.
Go back, rewind now.
Yes. We'll wait. It's cool.
We're right here. Don't worry.
And awkward silence. So, all right. So we are announcing stage 1 of the DerbyCon CTF.
Is it my stage?
No, dude. No. We have an order, like in pen testing.
I get it. Got to save it for one of the harder stages. Okay.
Wait. Is mine level 1 because it's the easiest?
You are no. I thought because you said, "Oh, I'm going to do this type of level." I was like, "Well, in a pen test, what do you do first? You do reconnaissance."
I like your answer.
He's like wiping the sweat off his nose.
You can tell he's been married for a while.
Yeah, a little bit. Anyway, so the first stage was done by Miss Berlin. I'm going to let Miss Berlin explain it to you. And we're not going to be explaining this all over Hell's Half Acre. So you're going to have to listen to this episode and get it.
Yes.
Because we're not going to be posting clues all over Twitters and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So it's not that difficult. Level 1. I tried to make it not that difficult anyways. Although you do have you have to sift through the whole internet is what you have to do.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah. There's 3 flags in the internet somewhere that you have to find. So go for it. No, that's it.
Wow.
No, I'm joking.
Okay.
That's not it.
Okay. I was like, whoa, I know we have some stuff in the show notes we could put in there, I guess.
So in the show notes is what I'm going to say. So the internet's a big place. I put 3 flags out there, and it's your job to see how many you can find. I have 2 hints. First hint is the company's name is Big Bob's Chemistry Lab. That has to do with this level of the CTF. Mm-hmm. So it's a fake company that I created in my basement.
No,
I didn't really.
Meth lab in your basement?
Yeah, it's my meth lab's name.
Right.
Is Big Bob's Chemistry Lab.
Breaking Berlin.
Right. And number 2 is there's something illegal going on with Big Bob's Chemistry Lab, and you're supposed to find out what as one of the flags.
That's crazy. Okay.
Out of one of the 3 flags. So
okay.
We also put a Google Forms link that you can submit your answers to. We do ask for some sort of contact information, whether it's your email or your Twitter handle, just so we can contact you for level 2.
Yep.
But once you find the 3 flags, go ahead and submit them, and we'll add it to your total
That's
for
right.
the CTF, and then you get level 2.
That's right. Yeah. And, if you're worried about us harvesting your email to send you spam, you should be. I
already have them anyways. I shouldn't.
Didn't we just talk about this?
I know. So
Wait,
yeah,
we're under GDPR now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Look,
crap.
I'm not. Yes, I know. I'm sorry.
Damn it.
So yeah, just Twitter or email, and that will be used to send out level 2's, bit. Whether level 2 be mine or Mr. Betcher's. Mr. Betcher's on the ball. He's got one already, and he's thinking about doing yet another one. So that's pretty cool. I don't know how far we'll take this, but we would like to have it done by mid-August, so that way if people can still buy unnecessarily expensive flights and maybe try to stay at a hostel somewhere.
Right.
It is for a free ticket.
The idea I got this from is I took Chris Hadneggy's course on social engineering in OSINT 2 years ago now at DerbyCon. Yeah. And he had something similar, but at a way bigger scale.
He knows a little bit about OSINT.
Yeah. I cannot believe the amount of hours that him and other people probably put into creating fake personas on the internet.
Now you told me a story. I don't know if we can put this on. Let me look at my time check here. Okay. You said that he has an entire fake company?
He does. He has a whole fake company with real people working for him
that don't know that they actually work for a fake company.
Correct.
My mind just.
Do they pay taxes?
I assume that not the fake company. The fake company doesn't pay taxes, but the real people must, because they're getting money from.
They get a salary. Yeah.
What kind of company is it? I'm just imagining like a coffee barista or somebody working for a fake coffee company or something.
I don't remember the kind of company it was. I think it might. Yeah, I don't even remember.
Well, let's not. If he's giving out the class, I don't want to spoil anything for people.
I think it's still part of his class, but it was probably one of the funnest CTFs I've actually competed in.
God, man, that dude. Yeah. Man, we got to have him on just for that. That sounds like fun. All right.
Yeah, I could ask him.
All right. So, Big Bob's. No, I'm sorry. What is it? Big Bob's Chemistry Lab. And Big Bob is doing something really illegal. Find out what. So, and then submit the flags to the Google form that's in the show notes. You must submit the stuff in the show to the form.
Yeah, don't send me texts or tweets or whatever with your flags.
No 3 a.m. tweeting to.
So there's just
Amanda.
one flag.
Yeah, there are three
but
flags.
In the forum, there's only one.
Well,
how does that work?
Submit it 3 times.
Okay, so you put your name, your Twitter,
every time you put the same
email. And then you put one flag, submit, then the next one with the same info, submit again.
Yep. And there's also a spot on where you found the flag, and that's required as well.
Cool. Yeah. And she has all the answers. So, yeah. We'll do a post-mortem after.
Chemistry lab actually is answering. All they do there at the chemistry lab is sort out these Google forms, right? And put names to faces and answers to emails.
That's exactly it.
Right.
That's exactly it. All right. So, submit. Yeah, I already got Miss Wendy. So, Mick Douglas, we recorded this on the 20th of July, but we just did the first class with Mick Douglas in his PowerShell class. It is phenomenal. It was a how-to on PowerShell, but we're going to get into some really deep dive and stuff with some defense frameworks. It's going to be some really great stuff. So there's still plenty of time for you to join. You just missed the first class. We'll probably lock it after the end of the second class, but it's $20. It's actually going to be $40 because it's going to go over 2-month period. So it's going to end in mid to like the 3rd week in August. So the way Patreon does things is it charges you at the first of the month. So it's really a $40 class, but you're going to get charged $20 at the outset. We have a video option. It's going to cost $20 for the videos, all told. If you want to join our class, get on our Patreon at patreon.com/BDS_podcast, and you can, or go to show notes. It's in the show notes, and sign up for the class. And, we had 14 people in there right now. We have 25 people signed up. I'm sure they'll show up after this class because they thought this was going to be uber simple, but I learned a lot from this class, and I don't know a lot about PowerShell. So
if you don't know who Mick Douglas is, just Google him. He is legit.
He is awesome. He does SANS courses for a living, as well as works for Binary Defense, which is Mr. Kennedy's defensive arm of his empire. And yeah, he's
defensive and an offensive arm.
That's
right.
Well, defense is going to be like blocking. Yeah, like high block,
so defense
and
is blocking.
And then the trusted seg is the offensive arm. So I don't know where we're going with that. So
me neither.
Yeah. So So you got your DerbyCon CTF stuff. Go forth and hack and do Google searchings, and Google is your friend. Mr. Betcher, LogMD came out with version 1.2. Isn't that awesome?
Oh yeah. That was a relief.
Wow, so excited.
Yes, I am excited.
Yeah, great.
Now I can sleep.
That's cool. And this is the free. This is what did you put in the free version that you can't get in that you get in the paid version?
What did I put in the free that you can't get in the paid?
Well, I mean, what did you put in the free version that just came out?
The biggest thing is auto runs. So we basically scan the system for anything that runs automatically when you boot up, or when you click certain buttons, like what happens when you double click a PDF file.
Right.
Well, it's got to run something, right? So that's an auto run. So in Windows 10, there's about, average of about 1,200 of these things that run automatically.
Holy cow.
So we put those in a spreadsheet that you can parse, you can grep, you can do whatever you want in its formatted properly. A lot of the auto run tools previously, good luck parsing those.
Yeah.
So now you can filter them however you want. Use the incredible tool called Excel and let it do its magic, whatever you want. It's a CSV file. So
nice.
You can push it out into your entire environment, run auto runs, and pull it down, and then you can find out what everybody's running right in your environment by default. And you might find some hackery there as well.
Very cool.
It's looking at persistence.
Awesome. All right.
Among other things.
So yeah, you can go find that at, why don't you just give out all your contact information now so we can get this all done? And
sweet. You can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Betcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. And if you're interested in LogMD, just go to log-md.com.
Nice. Okay. Miss Berlin, same thing. If people want to try to harass you for more hints and stuff on the CTF.
They're not going to get any more hints.
Wow, harsh, man.
You can hit me up at @InfoSister on Twitter, INFOSYSTIR.
Awesome. So our show, Breaking Down Security, can be found at breakingsecurity.com, BRAKEING security.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. BreakSec podcast is at BreakSec. BreakSec, BRAKESEC. It's a whole thing with the whole breaking thing where it's my last name, BRAKE. So we're on.
I finally get it now.
We're gonna annual employee training is gonna have to commence again, I guess.
Put the brakes on security. What?
I can't hate that. Actually.
Oh my God. Now everybody under 20 just completely left the podcast.
Yeah. They're not cool anymore, but they use Facebook and stuff. So we have a Slack. We have a very active Slack. As a matter of fact, many of you have probably just recently joined us because you had to get on the DerbyCon ticket auction, which we have currently going on. It's about 5 hours old. We just started it. Sorry that you didn't get the ticket because it ended on Friday the 21st. You can try again.
Talking in the future.
Yeah, we're talking at you from the past. So you can sign up on our Slack. We have a lot of people. We have a lot of channels. Pen Test channel, an OSINT channel. The PowerShell class, if you were attending it, also has a dedicated channel to that. And if you don't go to the class, you can still come in and talk about PowerShell stuff with Mick. You can sign up at breaksec.signup.team, and that our fancy little bot will send you something in email, and then you can sign up and join us. So our general tab has about 500 people. Some of them are inactive.
That's bigger than most small towns.
I know, right? I only had 1,300 people in the town I grew up.
And a lot more intelligent.
Ooh, Wow, shots fired there. All right. Well, we have to go. I have to go. I'm tired, and I volunteered today to clean up a beach, so that was rough, and I've got dirt under my fingernails.
Aww.
Need to go get a mani-pedi, I think.
Aww.
So, all right. I'm Brian and Miss Berlin and Mr. Betcher. Thank you for listening.
Amanda's like, I've had dirt under my fingernails for like months.
Yep.
And
Wow.
that's why they were like, okay, you're head goon.
Your head goon. Well, she doesn't
Head
mind
goon.
throwing down, so that's why.
I know.
Fist of
Don't mess
fury.
with-
I
mess with
can't say that. Never mind. Continue.
So that was it for this week on Breaking Down Security. Be nice to one another. Have a safe week, and we will talk to you again real soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.